regulation that promotes innovative, multidisciplinary, and collaborative practices and education which produce quality care and positive patient outcomes. So, meeting procedures, I will go ahead and remind everybody on this side of the desk that microphones are super critical. So, make sure that before you speak, you turn it on, and when you're done, turn it off. While the room can hear us, the reality is that live feed doesn't hear anything if our microphones are off. So, we want to really make sure that we are projecting out to the live stream. There are signs with the QR code with the agenda on it, and the Wi-Fi is available on the screen by the wall where Lily is sitting. With that, I will turn it over to Danny so that we can take roll.
Thank you. Bradley Miller.
Here.
Jenny Yoakum. Rick Fernandez. Haysha Freeman. Donnie Lewis. Randy Martin. Donna Montemayor. Ian Shaw. Suzette Tijerina. And Rick Tisch. Not here.
All right, we will show that we have a quorum and that Rick Tisch is not in attendance. As always, there is CE for this meeting, 3 hours of CE. You do need to stay until the end, so when we get to the end of the meeting, we will have a QR code that you can scan to get that. With that, board members, we have all reviewed or gotten a copy of our minutes. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion.
Have a motion from Bradley to approve the minutes, and this is for both meetings, May 6th and June 17th. Do we have a second? I have a second from Donnie. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And with that, we will start with C.1, and I will turn it to John for our adoption of rules.
Thank you, Madam President. Board members, in the rule PDFs you've been provided, there are bookmarks with links to the lines with the edits that we're going to talk about. And also for the rules for adoption, you have received copies of the orders and preambles and a OneDrive link that was sent to you. And also you have them on your computers. All right, the rules for adoption. 3 of the rules up for adoption today were proposed at the May 6, 2025 board meeting, and they were published in the June 27, 2025 issue of the Texas Register. The 3 rules regarding fees were proposed at the June 17, 2025 board meeting and published in the July 4, 2025 issue of the Texas Register. And the first item, C.1, we're going to look at is amendments concerning fees, and this is C.1.1.1. The first rule is amendments at 291.6 concerning pharmacy license fees. And if you look at that, you're going to see that on line 58, the initial license fee goes up to $610. And on line 62, the renewal fee is $607. On the next one that we're going to do these all together. The next one is C.1.1.2, amendments at 295.5 concerning pharmacists, license, or renewal fees. There on line 60, you're going to see the initial license fee at $399. And on line 63, the renewal fee at $396. The next one, C.1.1.3, amendments at 297.4 concerning pharmacy technician and pharmacy technician trainee registration fees. On line 61, you're going to see the initial technician registration fee of $88. And on line 63, the renewal fee is $85. And there were no comments received regarding these rules.
Board members, these are the fees that were discussed at the last meeting and proposed. Do I have a motion to adopt or any discussion? Donna has made a motion to adopt. Do we have a second? Donnie has made that second. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion carries. John, if you'll take us to the next.
The next item is C 1.2.1, amendments to 291.9 concerning prescription delivery. And we start out on lines 47 through 48. It provides that a pharmacist or pharmacy by means of its employee or by use of a common, and then the new part here is or contract carrier, and it removes the example of the U.S. mail at the request of the patient may. And then we jump to lines 62 through 66, and it provides that a pharmacist or pharmacy by use of unmanned aircraft systems, i.e. drones, at the request of a patient or patient's agent may deliver prescription drugs, excluding controlled substances or sterile compounded preparations, to a selected delivery location mutually agreed upon by the patient and the pharmacist using the pharmacist's professional judgment. The board did receive comments from Memorial Hermann Health System, Zipline International, and Rob Getty's PharmD with CVS Health in support of the amendments. And the next one we're going to do together with that is C 1.2.2, and that's amendments to 291.12, and that is also concerning the delivery of prescription drugs. And we're going to start out with some definitions. On line 45, it defines common carrier as a person or entity who holds out to the general public a willingness to provide transportation of property from place to place for compensation in the normal course of business. On line 48, it adds a definition of a contract carrier, and that is a person or entity who provides to industrial customers, pursuant to the terms of a bilateral agreement, the transportation of property for compensation in the normal course of business. On lines 51 through 58, we're going to add contract carrier a couple places. Again, remove the example of the U.S. mail. On lines 59 through 62, we're going to talk about the standards. And the pharmacy shall ensure that all prescription drugs are delivered to the patient or patient's agent in accordance with nationally recognized standards, such as those of the manufacturer or the United States Pharmacopoeia. And the new part here is that the pharmacy is responsible for any problems in the delivery of a prescription drug by a contract carrier. Line 66, we're talking about temperature, and here it just adds the contract carrier language. And on lines 75 through 77, regarding refusal to delivery, it adds the contract carrier language in two places. And on lines 78 through 81, it adds the contract carrier language in two places there as well. All right, jumping down to lines 87 through 91, it provides that delivery by unmanned aircraft systems, i.e. drones, a pharmacy may deliver prescription drugs, excluding controlled substances or sterile compounded preparations, by use of a common or contract carrier providing an unmanned aircraft system delivery service as provided in 291.9, which we just talked about, of this title on request of the patient or patient's agent. And we're going to talk about the standards, and that's on lines 92 through 97. And that provides that unmanned aircraft systems shall maintain appropriate federal registration and comply with all state and federal laws and rules. The pharmacy shall ensure that all prescription drugs are delivered to the patient or patient's agent in accordance with nationally recognized standards, such as those of the manufacturer or the United States Pharmacopoeia. The pharmacy is responsible for any problems in the delivery of the prescription drug. On lines 98 through 100, it provides that the pharmacist in charge is responsible for developing written policies and procedures regarding prescription drug delivery in accordance with this subsection to be used by pharmacy personnel to include, but not limited to, the following. And here on lines 101 through 109, we have the training pharmacy personnel engaged in preparing and packaging prescription drugs for delivery. B is packaging prescription drugs for delivery. C is the verification of the correct recipient and delivery address. D, maintaining the confidentiality of prescription records. E, secure transfer of prescription drugs from the pharmacy. F, provision of patient counseling. G is remediation of errors in delivery or adverse events. And H is record keeping. On lines 110 through 111, it talks about packaging, and then provides that the pharmacy shall ensure that prescription drugs are packaged in commercially available tamper-evident packaging. Lines 112 through 116 discuss temperature. The pharmacy shall ensure that any prescription drug delivered by common or contract carrier providing an unmanned aircraft system delivery service is packaged in a manner that maintains a temperature range appropriate for the drug. This may include, without limitation, use of temperature tags, time temperature strips, insulated packaging, gel ice packs, or a combination of these as necessary. Lines 117 through 119 discuss records. The pharmacy shall document each change in the chain of custody of a prescription drug, including departure of the prescription drug from the pharmacy, transfer to the person or entity fulfilling delivery, and delivery to the patient. Lines 120 through 123, confirmation of presence at selected delivery location. The pharmacy shall receive confirmation from the patient or patient's agent that the patient or patient's agent is present at the selected delivery location before unmanned aircraft system delivery is initiated. Lines 124 through 126 discuss security. The pharmacy must ensure that delivery is made to a reasonably secure location at the selected delivery location that minimizes the opportunity for unauthorized access to prescription drugs and confidential prescription records. On lines 127 through 130, it adds the contract carrier language again in 2 places. It also provides the language that or the common or contract carrier providing an unmanned aircraft systems delivery service to also comply with the following. All right. The board received comments from Memorial Health System, Zipline International, and Rob Geddes, PharmD with CVS Health, in support of the amendments. The board also received a comment from Janu Phillip, RPH, Walgreens Company, in support of the amendments, but also suggesting the removal of temperature control requirements for delivery of prescription drugs by a common or contract carrier providing an unmanned aircraft system delivery service. And that was all the comments.
All right. Thank you, John. At this time, I'll call Memorial Health with Benita and Freddie coming forward. And as always, if you'll introduce yourselves and...
All right. Good morning. Is my mic on? Okay, let me read
You
the
should have a green
directions.
light if it's on.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Benita. I oversee pharmacy services at Memorial Hermann Health System in Houston, Texas.
And I'm Freddie Warner. I serve Memorial Hermann as the Chief Government Relations Officer for the system. We appreciate the opportunity very much to be here again today. And on behalf of our system, our board, and our leadership team, want to express appreciation to the members of the board, to Director Carroll, to Megan, to Eamon, and to the staff of the board for giving us the opportunity over the course of the last year and a half to better educate y'all and to work with you to develop the rules package that you'll consider today. We appreciate your support of the rule package and also would look forward to the opportunity to come forth next year and as we get off the ground with Zipline and provide the opportunity to give you some updates on how we're doing. So thank you very much for your commitment of time over the last many months working with us. We appreciate it.
Always welcome to Houston. Let us know when you'd like to come and see what we're doing, not only around drone delivery services, but pharmacy services as a whole.
Thank you to you both. Any questions for these two individuals? All right.
Thank you very
so
much.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, we'll call Kaval Patel from Zipline forward.
Hello, I'm Kaval Patel, General Counsel at Zipline International, Inc. I'll keep this very, very short. Just really wanted to share my full support on behalf of Zipline International, our board, our shareholders, our employees, our leadership team, and our customers. And would also just really like to share my appreciation and really thank you all for taking the time to craft a durable rule package that I think will do a lot of good for Texans, and starting here in Dallas-Fort Worth and then in Houston. You all really dug in, asked the right questions, and I think we have a rule here that is very, very exciting for the entire state and for access overall. So, thank you.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Patel before he leaves?
You were you said Dallas and Houston. Do you have plans in other cities and going forward, like in South Texas or in rural areas out in the West?
Definitely. Right now we are In Dallas-Fort Worth, which I know is an extremely large area. We're going to be in 22 different cities and towns in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. After that, we're going to be launching in the Houston metropolitan area. And in parallel with that, we are looking for opportunities to support rural Texas and food deserts and medication deserts throughout the state.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, board members, at this time, we're going to take these two together. Need to see what your thoughts are. Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Just a comment. I think these are good rules in general, but on C 1.2.2 on line 92, there's a very good phrase on standards written there. The only thing I say is that some of the following language maybe not be necessary because we have a really broad statement about standards. Just trying to find ways not to write so many rules, like you see in the line 112 as a temperature thing, and I'm not against that the language on there, but I'm just saying. Seems to me like those standards are kind of called out already without being specific to include as much detail as we're putting on the rules. I'm just trying to always find ways to minimize the amount of lines we put in the board rules, that's all. I'm not against what's put on here, but to me it seemed like we had enough in just saying we have the standards, maintaining standards in accordance, and being accountable for that if you're a pharmacy. But if you put other additional comments, it just adds more. I think it's pretty understood that temperature is a standard we have to maintain, but that was all I'm calling out. But otherwise, I don't have a problem with it. I just want to make sure we don't overdo rules because it seems like the book just keeps getting bigger and bigger, unfortunately. Yeah. That's all I wanted to say, just a comment.
Okay.
So just to be clear, that particular line is may include, meaning that it's optional, not shall include, correct? Is that shall is you have to and may is could. Is that right, Megan?
Yeah, so when you're looking at line 112, it starts off with shall. So you have, must ensure that it's packaged in a manner that maintains the temperature range, but you're correct. After that, those are examples of what could be used to accomplish that.
Okay.
And I believe that was a conversation that you all had at a previous board meeting.
I believe it mimics what we did for regular delivery
Correct.
as well.
Mhm.
So, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to know if any of this differs from, say, how overnight delivery of temperature-controlled medications are handled through UPS or FedEx.
So the temperature requirements are there for UPS and overnight. So it does, as Donna pointed out, it mimics what we had done before. Megan?
Haysha, if you want to look at, I believe it's line 65, that has the temperature, and it's very similar language to what's being added for drone delivery.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I just want to make sure we're not being any more restrictive with drone than we are other delivery methods.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none at this point, I will entertain a motion to adopt. You would like to make a motion? Haysha has made a motion to adopt. Do we have a second? Ian has made the second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, John, if you want to take us to C.1.3.
Yes, Madam President. All right, what we're looking at here is amendments to 291.17 concerning inventory requirements. At the February board meeting, there was discussion of removing the notarization requirement, and this simply removes that requirement. I would point out that this proposed rule amendment was included and considered in the Governor's March 2025 Small Business Freedom Council report. So for all pharmacies, if you look at lines 89 through 91, lines 102 through 104, and lines 114 through 116, it simply strikes through the requirement that the pharmacist in charge signature be notarized within 3 days after the inventory is complete. We did receive one comment from Rob Geddes, PharmD with CVS Health, in support of the amendment.
All right. Thank you, John. At this time, I'll call forward Chris Demby.
How do I sound? I'll be yelling anyway. My name's Chris Demney. I'm a pharmacist. I'm speaking for myself. We're talking about removing the notary on annual inventory and several other inventories. So who can possibly be against this? The 99% of pharmacists who are good and honest and want to do everything right, it's just a nuisance to them. And the 1% who would divert drugs, this makes it easier for them to hide their diversion. Therefore, this also. So who's against it? Maybe only me. But the rules aren't in place for your practice or mine, for the law-abiding pharmacists. Rules are in place to prevent the bad people from not practicing pharmacy the way it should be. The counseling rule is only in place for the pharmacists who wouldn't counsel. Good pharmacists counsel anyway. We don't need a rule that tells them to, but that rule's in place. Rule's been in place forever. Does anybody know why it was put there? I mean, is anybody old enough to remember? It's been around forever. Did anybody do any research? Talk to Fred Brinkley or any of the old guys? It has to have been put there to help make it harder to falsify documentation and make it easier to divert drugs and not get caught. My thoughts as a young pharmacist, that notary made it clear that that is a very important document. So I took it very seriously. What does a notary do? It prevents fraudulent date, prevents fraudulent signatures. Oh no, I forgot. I didn't do my inventory. I'm just going to falsify it. I'm going to go back and put May 1st on it and it'll be fine. So that's a fraudulent documentation. So the notary prevents that. Prevents a fraudulent signature. I've taken over as pharmacist in charge of this pharmacy in January. Well, I'm going to pull the May inventory and put in a new one, and I'll sign Julie Spears' name. Then she's the one that took that inventory. She's responsible. So I can just slide it in. It would take a lot of work for any of our inspectors to figure out that that's a forged signature. The other thing we can do is, as a pharmacist in an illegal pharmacy, I can go back in January and I'll change my annual inventory for May and for the year before, and I'll take out 500 hydrocodone 2.5s, 5s, 7.5s, and 10s. So those never existed. When somebody goes to inspect, that's their starting point. I've falsified that document. If it's notarized, you can't go back and falsify and put something in. So my talk here is really speculation. This rule's been around forever, so we don't have a control group to see if it's going to have any effect. But really, if anybody understands what effect this is going to have, it's board staff. Did anybody ask Carolyn Hotchkiss how this would affect enforcement if they took away the notary? Did anybody go to Iona Grant and say, how's this going to affect compliance? Do they like having that notary there? Has anybody talked to Sean Cambron, his investigations commander, what he thinks? Because those are the people that know how it's going to affect. Otherwise, we're just guessing. Are we going to make this rule change and not have any clue as to what the consequences might be? My thought is no. And if you can't bring yourself to say no, we shouldn't do this, should we at least table it and actually get some information from the people in the field who will probably understand how this will affect the practice of pharmacy and the people of Texas? Anytime we remove documentation requirements, it's going to be easier to divert. We can't prevent diversion, but we can make it as easy as possible for the DEA and the Board of Pharmacy to find it when they inspect, because that's one of the only tools that we've got. So our question, the question that you're going to have to answer when you make this vote is, what's more important, saving a pharmacist in charge 30 minutes to go to the bank once a year to get it notarized, or to keep that document in place that's going to make it easier for regulators to tell and to detect and prove diversion. Which choice are you going to make? What's more important? What's more your charge for the people of Texas? Because our action statement says one of the things you do is take action which prioritizes the health and safety of people of Texas. Which more prioritizes the health and safety of the people of Texas? Keeping documentation that will help detect and deter diversion, or saving a pharmacist 30 minutes once a year? Does anybody have any questions or thoughts for me?
Any questions for Chris?
Yes,
Chris,
sir.
hey, thanks for coming up and speaking. What is the notary signing off to when they sign off on the?
Notary is signing off that your pre-printed annual inventory and the other inventories that are involved, that it is complete and accurate, and you understand the document and its purpose. They notarize it. They sign. They put their stamp on it. They sign it. They say, this is the date this was notarized. And board rules require it to be notarized within 3 business days of the day the annual inventory.
Yes.
And I do more of these than anybody because I'm PIC of multiple surgery centers. It takes me less than 30 minutes to go to the bank and get it notarized. You can go to a UPS store and get it notarized. This is not a huge burden on pharmacists to do this compared to the safety that we're going to instill in helping prevent controlled substances. And there's not anybody here who thinks that the opioid crisis isn't a problem. I'm sorry, sir.
No,
Go
you're
ahead.
good. Does the notary attest to the counts that are in the inventory?
Not possible. The notary says that this is a valid document. There's no scratch outs. There's no blanks. It is a complete and accurate document. And they notarize that it is your, they take your ID. It is your signature. It was notarized on this date. So they validate that you are the person signing. They validate that it is done on this date.
My only follow-up, last question is, how many other states have a notary requirement? Do you know?
My understanding, as I've heard from somebody's letter, that no other states have it. The DEA doesn't require it. The DEA doesn't even require annual inventory. Are we going to take that away too? It's not required. I think your duty is to the people of Texas, and I think this notary requirement makes it easier for the Board of Pharmacy and the DEA to detect controlled substance diversion and to prevent it in the future. So once again, your question is, which is more important, 30 minutes of a pharmacist's time once a year, or a document that will help prevent more controlled substances making it into the illegal markets? Thank you, sir.
Any other questions for Chris? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, board members, discussion, thoughts? Jenny?
I think Chris had some valid points with it, making sure that it is the official document and that it could prevent falsification of documentation down the road. I could see where it could be handy to keep.
Other thoughts?
I happen to be a notary, and when you become a notary, you are really not looking at as much the document of what you're looking at as much as you're looking at the validity of the person signing it and the person in front of you. So if someone came up and said they want me to notarize something, they could change their quantities. I wouldn't know. I mean, I might know about it because I'm a pharmacist, but I wouldn't know their backstory of what they're doing. So, and then to the point of leaving a facility and going to get it notarized, if you don't have an in-person notary in your building, that's 30 minutes that we're not giving care to some patient, really. And I don't think it does any good, really. I mean, I notarized documents for real estate or different things that we do. But the general public in a bank or in a UPS store, they will not have any degree of knowledge about what the document's about. So to me, it's I'd rather have that person in the facility working and taking care of my grandchildren than I would them going to get something that's really not, I don't think, necessary. And plus on the chain side, I'm not a part of that world, but can you imagine what it takes for the chain stores to have to do all that? You know, plus independents don't have an extra person to go do that. They have this, they're by themselves.
Right. And
So-
that's why the governor's small business group looked at it as an assistance to small business owners.
Right. Anyway, thank you.
Haysha.
I did talk to people in preparation for today, not necessarily the names that you listed. I'm consumer representative on the board, not from the pharmacy industry, so I definitely do my due diligence and learn what I can in prepping for these meetings. I have relatives and friends who are pharmacists, and so whenever there's a generalized question like this, without telling them what's going on or anything that's not published for the public, I'll turn to them for questions. And I asked them, what's this thing about having to have stuff notarized? And every one of them was like, oh my gosh, it's the biggest headache, it's the biggest hassle. And more than half of them said, we have staffing issues because of it. And we have prescriptions that aren't getting filled and out the door in a timely manner because of it. And they're small mom and pop pharmacies. And whenever I ask them, I know whenever I go to get something notarized, even just the paperwork for joining the board, I want to know where you get stuff notarized, where you're out the door and you're back in 30 minutes, because I don't know where that is. So from what I've heard from people that I trust in my life, it is a burden in going out and getting stuff notarized.
I have a quick question for anybody who's done this inventory and gotten it notarized. Do you get every page of the inventory notarized, or just a cover
No.
sheet, or just the top sheet? Right.
Yeah, it's just the
It's just
cover
a
sheet.
So, I mean, if you wanted to change something, there's multiple pages that, potentially could be altered.
Yes, sir, Randy.
I can respond to her questions if you would like.
Well, let me go to Randy.
So I did, there was one interesting point raised, and that was, if someone were a bad actor and they did want to falsify a document. One thing I kind of, in reading this, and maybe it's in there and I've missed it on the second read, but I think whenever we were talking about it last time, I think we were also going under the assumption that there's two people signing this, right? There's the person doing the inventory and the pharmacist in charge. But I guess the one thing that just kind of occurred to me was, and in many cases, there's lots of documents where you can either get it notarized or you can have a witness signature, right? And they're like our power of attorneys are that way and a few other things. So I'm wondering if the pharmacist in charge is the one taking the inventory, if I'm reading correctly, that would be one signature. Would it be reasonable to just simply require a witness signature?
So I believe you all had discussion about this previously, and there were concerns if you're talking about, the small pharmacies, they may only have the one pharmacist there. And so then you're essentially requiring those pharmacies who only have that pharmacist in charge there to go and get these notarizations, which is counter to the Governor's Small Business Council's proposal.
No, that makes sense. They'd probably find a customer to sign. That would be the worst.
Yes. Somebody.
So no, okay, point's taken. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Comments? Did you have something, Rick? Oh, gotta go backward. At this time, I mean, if there are no discussions, did you want your question answered?
Would you like me to respond to her
Well,
question?
let me ask her if she still needs your question. That was a rhetorical question? Okay, it was rhetorical, so I think we're good. So hearing or seeing no other questions, I'm sorry, what? Okay, at this time, I will take a motion to adopt.
I move that we adopt.
So we've got a motion from Donna and a second from Donnie. All those in favor? Any opposed? We have 2 opposed. Motion does carry. Did you get those, Lily? Okay. All right. With that, we will go to the proposed rules.
All right, Madam President, we're going to look, the first one is C 2.1, amendments to 28163 concerning considerations for criminal offenses. These amendments, if adopted, update the board's disciplinary guidelines concerning the imprisonment of a licensee, a registrant, or an owner of a pharmacy following a felony conviction or deferred adjudication. And this is being done in accordance with Senate Bill 1080, and it clarifies certain provisions to align more closely to the existing statute. So the first part we're going to look at is lines 18 through 31, and it starts out by adding that the board may revoke a license or registration upon the imprisonment of the licensee, the registrant, or the owner of a pharmacy following a felony conviction or deferred adjudication. It then provides that the board shall revoke a license or registration upon the imprisonment of the licensee, the registrant, or the owner of a pharmacy following and then there's a list. Number 1, a felony conviction or deferred adjudication for an offense that directly relates to the occupation of a licensee or registrant or the operation of a pharmacy. An offense listed in Article 42.054 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, or a sexually violent offense as defined by Article 62.001 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. Or 2, felony community supervision revocation. 3, the revocation of parole. Or 4, the revocation of mandatory supervision. On lines 37 through 43, it provides that the board has determined that criminal offenses listed in subsection I of this section directly relate to the occupation of a licensee or registrant or the operation of a pharmacy. For all other offenses listed in this section, and considering whether a criminal conviction or deferred adjudication directly relates to the duties and responsibilities of a licensee or registrant or the owner of a pharmacy, the board shall consider the following factors. And we start with the nature and seriousness of the crime, then the relationship of the crime to the purposes for requiring a license or registration to engage in the occupation of the licensee or registrant or the operation of a pharmacy, the extent to which a license or registration might afford the licensee or registrant an opportunity to repeat the criminal activity in which the person has been involved, the relationship of the crime to the ability, capacity, or fitness required to perform the duties and discharge the responsibilities of the licensee or registrant. And here's the new part, any correlation between the elements of the crime and the duties and responsibilities of the license or registration. On lines 67 through 74, it provides that the board has the authority to impose disciplinary action as authorized by the Act for those criminal offenses that provide grounds for discipline under the Act. In reaching a decision regarding the severity of the disciplinary sanction to impose on a license or registration, the board shall, in its discretion, unless otherwise specified in 281.64 of this title, and that's relating to sanctions for criminal offenses, also determine the person's fitness to perform the duties and discharge the responsibilities of a licensee or registrant by evaluating and balancing these factors in the following priority, with the first being the highest priority. The first one is the extent and nature of the person's past criminal activity. The second is the amount of time that has elapsed since the person's last criminal activity. The third is the person's rehabilitation or rehabilitative effort while incarcerated or following release as corroborated by extrinsic evidence. 4 is the age of the person at the time of the commission of the crime, if they were younger than 21 years of age at the time of the crime. 5 is the conduct and work activity of the person prior to and following the criminal activity. 6 is the new part, which is the evidence of the person's compliance with any conditions of community supervision, parole, or mandatory supervision, and other evidence of the person's fitness, including letters of recommendation. And what it does here is strikes through some prior requirements, or prior consideration, really, of letters from prosecutors, law enforcement, correctional officers, sheriffs, chiefs of police. All right. And that's the end of that.
All right. So these will be a motion to propose. Any comments, questions? Yes, sir.
Could you explain line 51? Any correlation between the elements of the crime and duties and the responsibilities of the license registration? What does that refer to? Like anything attached to it? Is it?
Pull your microphone up.
Oh, sorry. Just I just wanted just clarification on line 51. That's all.
So I believe this comes out of statute now, and so it's reflecting. So I'm not entirely sure of the legislative intent. We'd have to go and dig into that. But there are elements that you have to prove in order to show that somebody has committed a crime. So I think it's asking that you look at the elements of those crime and whether they relate to the duties and responsibilities of either being a pharmacist or a pharmacy technician. So, we often see somebody, let's say, who comes in with a theft, and that could relate to the duties because they're handling, drugs and things of value and that nature. So, you would look to see if those elements of that crime would relate to duties or responsibilities of the profession or the license or registration that they hold.
Any other questions? Yes, Donnie?
Excuse me, this is a question for John or for Megan. Can you explain or help us understand these correlation is with the duties of a pharmacist and what we're talking about here. But what about the offenses like we had talked about, a state jail felony or a DWI that had nothing to do with this? As far as their duties as a pharmacist or tech, how does that relate to how we regulate? If it's not part of this.
Sure. So the way this is set up, that line that Rick was pointing to, that's just for offenses that aren't already listed in here.
Okay.
So they've already determined that certain offenses, you don't have to do that sort of balancing act and that, consideration. So this is just for ones that aren't listed in here.
Right.
So if you're looking at, a felony conviction or something of that nature, or that falls in here. So if you look, let's see, I think it starts on line 23. Those don't have this consideration. When you drop down further, you probably have seen in informal conferences something like a DWI. It doesn't go just for the crime. So if it's a felony, it probably fell into that. But if you have 2 misdemeanors for that within a certain number of years, we're looking more at an impairment type situation. And so you're not necessarily going, you could be, but it's not necessarily going up there because it's a crime. It's going up in front of you because there's concern of potential impairment, and that's probable cause that could, the board needs to look into whether or not that person is impaired.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Is your concern that we would not be able to look at that anymore because it wasn't called out? in
That's
that
what I
list?
was thinking, because we're talking about primarily, in different lines, it says your duties of, in the pharmacy world. And so if you have a DWI, and we do get those cases, we do get those in the ICs, but I just was clarifying that, really. That's what.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? Seeing none, I will take a motion to propose. We have a motion to propose from Randy, a second from Donnie. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. John, if you'll take us through C.2.2.
Yes, Madam President. These are amendments concerning licenses and registrations for military service members, military veterans, and military spouses. And these changes here you're going to see at C.2.2.1. The first one is amendments at 283.12 concerning pharmacists. And on lines 18 through 31, it talks about alternative licensing procedure. For purposes of section 55.004, the Occupations Code, a military service member, military veteran, or military spouse may complete the following alternative procedures. And it adds, to apply for a pharmacist license, if the applicant holds a current license issued by another state that is similar in scope of practice to the license in this state and is in good standing with the state's licensing authority, or within the 5 years preceding the application date, they held a pharmacist license in this state. And it then talks about a provisional license. On receipt of the application, or receipt by the board of an application for a pharmacist license in accordance with this subsection, the board shall issue a provisional license to the applicant while the board processes the application. A provisional license issued under this subsection expires on the earlier of the date the board approves or denies the provisional license holder's application for the license, or the 180th day after the date the provisional license is issued. On lines 88 through 95, it talks about the expedited licensing procedure. For purposes of Section 55.005 of the Occupations Code, a military service member, military veteran, or military spouse may complete the following expedited procedures to apply for a pharmacist license if the applicant holds a current license issued by another state that is similar in scope of practice to the license in this state and is in good standing with that state's licensing authority, or within the 5 years preceding the application date held a pharmacist license in this state. Lines 144 through 151 talk about interim license for military service members or military spouse. In accordance with Section 55.0041 of the Occupations Code, a military service member or military spouse may be issued an interim pharmacist license if the member or spouse currently holds a license similar in scope of practice issued by the licensing authority of another state and is in good standing with that licensing authority, as specified in Section 55.0042 of the Occupations Code. On lines 52 through 170, provides that before engaging in the practice of pharmacy, the military service member or military spouse shall submit an application that includes A, a copy of the military member's orders showing relocation to the state. B, if the applicant is a military spouse, a copy of the military spouse's marriage certificate. C, a notarized affidavit affirming under penalty of perjury that the applicant is the person described and identified in the application. All statements in the application are true, correct, and complete. The applicant understands the scope of practice for a pharmacist license in this state and will not perform outside of that scope of practice. And the applicant is in good standing in each state in which the applicant holds or has held a pharmacist license. Lines 171 through 173 provide that a military service member or military spouse applying for an interim license under this subsection may not practice pharmacy in this state until issued an interim pharmacist license. Lines 174 through 197 provide that a military service member or military spouse applying for an interim license under the subsection the board shall, and provides A, determine whether the state in which the applicant is licensed issues licenses similar in scope of practice to a pharmacist license issued by the board, and notify the applicant that the board is issuing the interim license, the application is incomplete, or the board is unable to issue the interim license because the pharmacist license issued by the board is not similar in scope of practice to the applicant's license. 4, a military service member or military spouse may engage in the practice of pharmacy under an interim license issued under this subsection only for the period during which the military service member, or with respect to a military spouse, the military service member to whom the spouse is married is stationed at a military installation in this state. 5, in the event of a divorce or similar event that affects a person's status as a military spouse, the former spouse may continue to engage in the practice of pharmacy under an interim license issued under this subsection until the 3rd anniversary of the date that the spouse submitted the application required under paragraph 1 of this subsection. And 6, while engaged in the practice of pharmacy in this state, the military service member or military spouse shall comply with all other laws and regulations applicable to the business or occupation in this state. And the next one, which we're going to take up together, is C 2.2.2. And these are amendments to 297.10 concerning pharmacy technicians. And this is all going to sound very similar. On lines 18 through 32, again, we're going to talk about an alternative registration procedure. And for purposes of Section 55.004 of the Occupations Code, it provides that a military service member, military veteran, or military spouse may complete the following alternative procedures to apply for a pharmacy technician registration if the applicant holds a current registration issued by another state that is similar in scope of practice to the registration in this state and is in good standing with that state's licensing authority, or within the 5 years preceding the application date held a pharmacy technician registration in this state. Regarding a provisional registration, on receipt by the board of an application for a pharmacy technician registration in accordance with this subsection, the board shall issue a provisional registration to the applicant while the board processes the application. A provisional registration issued under this subsection expires on the earlier of A, the date the board approves or denies the provisional registration holder's application for the registration, or B, the 180th date after the date the provisional registration is issued. On lines 56 through 65, we talked about the expedited registration procedure. For purposes of Section 55.005 of the Occupations Code, a military service member, military veteran, or military spouse may complete the following expedited procedures to apply for a pharmacy technician registration if the applicant holds a current registration issued by another state that is similar in scope of practice to the registration in this state and is in good standing with that state's licensing authority, or within the 5 years preceding the application date held a pharmacy technician registration in this state. Lines 101 through 109, the interim registration for military service member or military spouse. In accordance with Section 55.0041 of the Occupations Code, a military service member or military spouse may be issued an interim pharmacy technician registration if the member or spouse currently holds registration similar in scope of practice issued by the licensing authority of another state and is in good standing with that licensing authority as specified in Section 55.0042 of the Occupations Code. On lines 110 through 129, it provides that before engaging in pharmacy technician duties, the military service member or military spouse shall submit an application that includes the following: A copy of the military member's orders showing relocation to the state. B, if the applicant is a military spouse, then a copy of the military spouse's marriage certificate. C, a notarized affidavit affirming under penalty of perjury that the applicant is the person described and identified in the application. All statements in the application are true, correct, and complete. The applicant understands the scope of practice for a pharmacy technician registration in the state and will not perform outside of that scope of practice. And the applicant is in good standing in each state in which the applicant holds or has held a pharmacy technician registration. Lines 130 through 132 provide that a military service member or military spouse applying for an interim registration under the subsection may not engage in pharmacy technician duties in the state until issued an interim pharmacy technician registration. On lines 133 through 146, it provides that a military service member or military spouse applying for an interim registration under the subsection, the board shall determine whether the state in which the applicant is registered issues registration similar in scope of practice to a pharmacy technician registration issued by the board, and notify the applicant that the board is issuing the interim registration, the application is incomplete, or that the board is unable to issue the interim registration because a pharmacy technician registration issued by the board is not similar in scope of practice to the applicant's registration. Finally, on lines 147 through 151, a military service member or military spouse may engage in pharmacy technician duties under an interim registration issued under this subsection only for the period during which the military service member, or with respect to a military spouse, the military service member to whom the spouse is married is stationed at a military installation in this state.
Thank you, John. All right, board members, questions, comments? Yes, sir. Rick?
My first comment is we just had a nice discussion about notary. Okay. So was that a requirement of the Senate bill to have a notarized affidavit for those on line 160 and then 119?
Yes, it is.
That was a requirement.
So everything that is reflected in these two comes directly out of the bills that were passed this session.
So there's no flexibility on that.
There's no flexibility with that. The legislature made that determination.
I had another follow-up question.
Go ahead.
Not a question or comment. I think it's just a very, very good thing to do to help expedite military. The interim provisional license, we don't have that feature for anybody who wants to come work here, right? The provisional application to have someone practice front, like similar to this military rule. What I'm getting at is, in case, I think it's a novel idea to have, because if you have an emergency of some sort and someone needs to have a provisional license, there's not a way of doing that otherwise. Is that correct?
We do have emergency licensure power. So yes, there are temporary emergency licenses. There's I don't know them off the top of my head. We'd have to pull it up, but there are requirements for that. We can't just do it anytime we feel like it. But there is power to authorize that, and I think we've seen that before with Hurricane Katrina. I'm pretty sure we did some during that time period, and there might have been some other natural disasters since then when that's been needed. It's usually when it's close to those state lines that pharmacists from other states come over.
What I was thinking about is kind of a bigger picture. I'm thinking about a very large company went bankrupt. Okay, not ours, thank God. Went bankrupt. Yet
They don't operate in our state. That's
no. What I'm saying is, if for example, some similar would happen in other states, what happened in where they operated in, the amount of workload that was sent to the pharmacies that were nearby these pharmacies that closed was very excessive. So in order to get by, to be able to handle the customers that came in, patients that came in, you have to bring in some people potentially to help them while you stabilize the situation and so forth. Even if you hire everybody from the other pharmacy, it takes a while. What I'm trying to get at is that if that were to happen in this state, but any situation where a company or organization goes under, the neighboring pharmacies will be inundated. And everybody loves the extra volume and business that could bring, but there isn't a way to help address that if you want to bring in help from other states to help them. I know Texas is pretty big, so we could probably wrestle some help, but I'm just saying that it would be something to consider in a similar situation, because other states had that problem where you wanted to send some help to those pharmacies to get them by, but you really couldn't because they weren't licensed and didn't have the ability to bring someone in. Those emergency measures wouldn't apply to a change of business, or it would just be related to a natural disaster.
They most likely wouldn't apply.
Okay.
Again, I don't have it in front of me. We'd have to look it up, but
Okay.
we'd be happy to
We
look
can
into that
discuss
for
in the
you.
next meeting if we go forward with it, but I just thought it'd be interesting to consider, because that kind of a thing would help ensure that patient care is not impacted in something like that, and the workload would not be excessive for the pharmacist's work. Could result in some patient errors and things like that. I just wanted to bring that up as an observation. Good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just
Yeah.
had one. Megan, what happens to these military pharmacists or techs or spouses if they want to stay here once their tour of duty is over and they want to just remain here? Does that license go permanent, or how does that work?
They go through the licensure process, so they can move into that application for a permanent license if like you say, they choose Texas as their forever home.
And they can do that at any time.
At any time,
Yeah.
they don't have to wait for the provisional or interim or whichever one they choose to end.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I had a couple of questions. So it looks like most of this is very prescriptive, but as has been mentioned, but there were two things that I had kind of a big question on. I guess they're related, but there's a statement both in the statute and then also in the proposed, or the soon to be proposed rules, I suppose, that states registration similar in scope of practice, and that would be a reason that we would not do even the provisional, I believe. Do we need to define that? And then a very related question, so I'll propose both questions at the same time. So do we need to define that to a certain degree? And then the second question I would have would be, and I should know this and I'm embarrassed that I don't, and it's great that it's going to be on the public record. Does every state require pharmacy technician registration? So in other words, if there's a state where, yeah, that's what I thought. And so I feel less dumb now. And so if you had someone that was practicing as a technician but not registered in a state, that was a military service member, this would not apply to them if they came to Texas, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So the more complicated question one then, do we need to define similar scope of practice? Because it's not in the statute, it's not in our proposed.
I don't think your legal team feels the need to define similar scope of practice. That's scope of practice is something that's very familiar in the legal world. But if you all think that it needs definition for the licensees or for yourselves, we could look into that.
My thought would be it's in the definitions of a pharmacist, and the duties are in the definitions in Class A, Class C, in all of our classes. So if you look at what can be done, that defines scope of practice. So I think it's already there. That would be my.
And I would add that currently we're required to look to see if the license in the other state is substantially equivalent. And this is relaxing that standard and changing it to similar in scope. And we don't have a definition for substantially equivalent, but we're able to successfully, determine whether that standard has been met. So I think under a more relaxed standard, it would be even easier for us to say, yes, that's pretty much the same thing as it is here.
Yes, sir, Rick.
Sorry, one more question because I don't get it. I guess I read the line. I guess it's the third anniversary of divorce, the 191. What does that mean? Third anniversary. Explain that to me. What is that mechanics of
Which line are you looking at again?
191 of 221.
Okay.
So it gives them time. So if the military spouse divorces, it doesn't automatically negate. It gives them 3 years to either apply for a permanent, or they would lose their status.
Okay, I get it now. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, what is the pleasure of the board as far as a motion?
I move to propose.
Donna has moved to propose. Rick Fernandez has seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries. John, you want to take us through C.2.3?
Yes, Madam President. Board members, these are amendments concerning common ownership. And the first one we're going to look at, here today we're going to talk about some definitions. The first one is C.2.3.1, amendments to 291.31. That is community Class A definitions, community pharmacy. And the first definition you're going to see is line 36 through 38, and that is defining common ownership as two or more pharmacies with an identical owner of record with the board, or that have owners of record with the board that are a parent, subsidiary, or affiliate of one another under Section 1.002 of the Business Organizations Code. And the next definition we're going to add is on lines 128 through 129, and that is owner of record. And that's defined as the direct owner of the pharmacy provided on the pharmacy's application for a pharmacy license, or most recent approved change of ownership form. And the next few that we're going to do together, the next one is C 2.3.2, amendments to 291.52. Here you're going to see the same definitions. This is for Class B nuclear pharmacies. And on lines 35 through 37, it's going to define common ownership as two or more pharmacies with an identical owner of record with the board, or that have owners of record with the board that are a parent, subsidiary, or affiliate of one another under Section 1.002 of the Business Organizations Code. And again, you're going to see the definition of owner of record on lines 105 through 106 as the direct owner of the pharmacy provided on the pharmacy's application for a pharmacy license or most recent approved change of ownership form. Moving down to C 2.3.3, amendments to 291.72. This is for Class C or institutional pharmacies, lines 35 through 37. Again, common ownership, two or more pharmacies with an identical owner of record with the board, or that have owners of record with the board that are a parent, subsidiary, or affiliate of one another under Section 1.002 of the Business Organizations Code. And then owner of record again, lines 125 through 126, the direct owner of the pharmacy provided on the pharmacy's application for a pharmacy license or most recent approved change of ownership form. The next one, C 2.3.4, amendments to 291.120. This is services provided by pharmacies. Again, definitions, lines 11 through 15, common ownership, two or more pharmacies with an identical owner of record with the board, or that have owners of record with the board that are a parent, subsidiary, or affiliate of one another under section 1.002 of the Business Organizations Code. And online, and then the fourth definition there is owner of record, the direct owner of the pharmacy provided on the pharmacy's application for a pharmacy license or most recent approved change of ownership form. Finally, regarding C 2.3.5, amendments to 297.2, this is for pharmacy technician and trainees. Again, definitions. Lines 10 through 14. First, it defines common ownership. Again, two or more pharmacies with an identical owner of record with the board, or that have owners of record with the board that are a parent, subsidiary, or affiliate of one another under section 1.002 of the Business Organizations Code. And then again, it defines owner of record as the direct owner of the pharmacy provided on the pharmacy's application for a pharmacy license or most recent approved change of ownership form. And those are all the additional proposed rules.
All right. Thank you, John. Board, questions, comments, thoughts? Can I have a motion to propose? We have a motion proposed from Randy, a second from Ian. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Danny, you want to take us through D on the agenda, which is the discussion of and possible action concerning reports of committees and task force?
Yes, ma'am. D.1, the report on the PMP Advisory Committee. There's no report again. We have not been able to meet, and we put some dates out with Dr. Kirk. So hopefully September, we'll have a report back for you guys next time. As far as D.2, the interagency PMP work group, again, there's not been any issues to work out. So that group hasn't met either. So more to come November.
All right. And before we get to financials, it's now 10:07. Let's go ahead and have a quick break. If we could be back at 10:20.
saved a seat for you. That's it. She's getting ready, I guess.
All right, it is 10:20, so we'll call the meeting back to order. And at this time, I will turn it over to Ruben for our financial update.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I will be going over the first 4 agenda items within E.1 regarding the agency's financial updates. I want to start with the financial documents provided to you, starting with E.1.1, which is the agency's review of fiscal year 2025 third quarter expenditures, or the budget status report. This report reflects the agency's expenditures standing as of May 31st of this fiscal year. The next item on the agenda is E.1.2. This report is the review of the board member travel budget. The spreadsheet details and reviews the board's in-state and out-of-state cumulative travel expenses as of the end of the third quarter of fiscal year 25. The next item on the agenda is E.1.3. There are 6 items for consideration of material changes to contracts for goods and services for the board review. The last item I will be going over on the agenda is item E.1.4. This agenda item that has been provided to you is the proposed fiscal year 26 agency's operating budget. This proposed budget adheres to the General Appropriations Act, which was just recently passed by the legislation this past May. The left side of the page reflects the agency's appropriations as stated in the General Appropriations Act. The left side also reflects the adjusted agency budget. Furthermore, the right side of the page reflects budgeted items designated by expense category, such as salaries, travel, and other operating expenses. The adjusted budget items are reconciled to the total expenditure categories or the total expenditure budget. At this time, I'm available for any questions you may have on any of the board materials provided to you.
Board members, do you have any questions for Ruben? Yes, Rick.
Ruben, what was any particular changes in 1.4 that we should be aware of versus this previous year? The new budget, 26 versus 25, any changes that occurred there?
The big changes that we had were some additional funds that we requested, which included additional employees. We received 5 employees for the next fiscal, or should I say the next biennium, and the funding for these 5 employees. In addition to that, the legislation also passed HB 500, which provided the agency in this current biennium funding for vehicles, software, and some additional IT costs. Those additional fundings will be, if not utilized by the end of the year, which more than likely will not, will be transferred over to the next biennium, so we can purchase these vehicles as we requested to the legislation. In addition to that, we received some additional amendments to our bill pattern in the General Appropriation Act for the Pharmacy Board, which we'll be going over shortly by other members of the agency. I hope I answered some of your questions.
I think thanks Ruben for that. That was a really good recap. There was also some, as far as our exceptional items, were some merit money too, so for staff, for performance.
Donnie?
Hey, I had a question on Bamboo Health. Can you explain or help me understand why the cost of the new contract amendment was $4 million when it originally started so low, but then it was previously at $10 million. Why is it so much each time we do this? Why is this going up so much on these new contracts?
From the initial start of Bamboo, which was a few years ago, approximately 3 or 4 years ago, it's accumulating. So like I say, it was 3.5, then it went up to 4, 4.2, 4.5. So the next biennium or next fiscal year, it's going to go up to that. Right now, cumulatively, it's 10 million. It's going to go up to 15 million cumulatively wise on the contract. The contract number does not change. We just layer it on top of each other. So next fiscal year for Bamboo, it's approximately about 4.5 million. But cumulatively wise, it's approximately about 15 because it's going to go up in cumulative wise.
So why is that? Why does it go up like that? That was my question, is why?
The legislature appropriates additional funds for the PMP. So every time those enhancements come in and we get that appropriation in the General Appropriations Act, the contract has to be amended to add those in.
Wow.
Does that help?
Yeah. It's just, okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? All right, well, board, we do need to approve the 2026 operating budget. So if I can have a motion to approve, which I see from Ian, I see a second from Brad. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The budget carries. At this time, I'll invite Raquel to come forward, and Caroline and Raquel will take us through the PRN program.
Thanks. I'll get started with the update on the number of participating individuals in the peer assistance program. This is E.2.1. The top chart is historical, so this is a look back at the last 3 fiscal years for participant numbers. The bottom chart is the current fiscal year. So the first column is the number of participants that were counted as of the start of the fiscal year. And then we've added participants each quarter. And so you're looking at the third quarter additional participants. And then these are cumulative counts throughout the year for the total so far in FY25. Do you have any questions for me?
Any
Okay, I'll
questions
turn it
for
over to
Caroline?
Raquel. Thanks. Raquel.
All right, Raquel. Make sure your microphone's on. Pull your microphone just a little bit closer, I think. Can y'all hear? Okay. Can y'all hear? Is she good on the live feed?
Am I better now?
There you are.
All right, I'll start over. Good morning, Madam President, members of the board and staff. My name is Raquel Lial, and I'm the director for PRN. I'm here today to present to the board PRN's report for the current fiscal year of the fourth quarter. And the Professional Recovery Network continues to receive a number of referrals regarding potentially impaired pharmacists and pharmacy students. Compliance by current participants is acceptable, and all concerns regarding public safety have been reported to TSBP. In May, PRN attended the NOAP conference in Las Vegas, the National Organization of Alternative Programs. The topic of the conference was strengthening healthcare monitoring programs. NOAP was established to promote public safety through participation of healthcare professionals in monitored rehabilitation and recovery as an alternative to licensed discipline, emphasizing fitness to practice and retention of competent professionals. In June, PRN attended the National Association of Social Workers Conference in Chicago. The topic of the conference was Social Work, Celebrating Our Legacy, Developing the Future. The conference focused on social work practice and behavioral health promotes well-being through assessment, diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of mental illness, substance use, and other addictions. Social work practice and behavioral health incorporates knowledge of human behavior, sociology, psychology, psychiatry, and many other social science disciplines. The 2025 TPA Conference and Expo took place on July 18th through the 20th at the Marriott Downtown Austin Hotel. PRN had a booth in the expo hall where PRN staff was available to discuss details of the PRN program with its attendees. PRN continues to explore opportunities to increase program visibility, to create awareness of the PRN program, and we will be reaching out to Texas pharmacy schools for the upcoming new school year. PRN Spring Seminar was scheduled for Friday, April 25th, and it was held online through Seminar Web. PRN participants are required to attend these seminars as it is stated in their support agreement. Our speaker for this past seminar was Jennifer C., and she has over 15 years experience with mental health and substance use and abuse. She was previously the clinical mental health trainer for HEB, traveling across Texas to educate leadership on the signs and symptoms of mental health and substance use within their partner population. She has extensive crisis response experience, including overseeing 911 mental health calls and working in Uvalde after the Robb Elementary School shooting. Currently, she works as a program manager for Starlight Recovery, an inpatient drug treatment facility, and sees clients in her private practice in San Antonio. Her topic, recognizing signs of codependency, self-sabotage, and other unhealthy relationship patterns, focused on how recovery changes the landscape of the relationships that we have with family, friends, coworkers, and loved ones. And the webinar discussed the following objectives. It had defining key concepts, which briefly explained what codependency, self-sabotage, and unhealthy relationship patterns look like in everyday life. Common signs and symptoms, which provided real-life scenarios that illustrate these types of patterns. The impact on relationships and how those behaviors affect everyone's different types of relationships. Recognizing patterns in oneself and in others. And she discussed important tips for self-awareness and being able to identify red flags. She talked about steps towards healing and change and discussed practical strategies for breaking these cycles, setting boundaries, and fostering healthier relationships. The LBB numbers for this past quarter were submitted to TSBP on June 10th, and they include all licensed pharmacists and pharmacy students enrolled in the PRN program. We have 0 volunteer pharmacy students, 2 board-ordered pharmacy students, 17 volunteer pharmacists, and 39 board-ordered pharmacists. And the last page is our page for financials for that quarter as well. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions for Raquel? All right, seeing none. Thank you as always, and thank you for the good work that you do.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I will invite Jeff Jones forward for our audit report. I will go ahead and let the audience know that at some point in Jeff's report, we will go into executive session to discuss IT security. And Jeff, if you'll let me know when you need for me to do that.
Sounds good. Let's see. How about now? All right. Good morning. I'm Jeff Jones, a senior manager with Weaver and Tidwell. I'm presenting today on behalf of Daniel Graves. Unfortunately, he's not with us today. He was conflicted. We'll be going over the internal audit activities performed for fiscal year 2025, as well as the outstanding findings associated with the internal audits that we performed to date. The State Auditor's Office required annual report, and then also we'll close with the executive session item. All right, so the first item on the agenda is a review of our internal audit plan and the activities that we performed in fiscal year 2025. Internal agency compliance was an internal audit that we performed that we previously presented on. Just as a recap, there were 2 low-rated findings on that. That was issued back in February. We also performed enforcement follow-ups over an initial audit we performed in fiscal year 2023. We completed follow-up procedures this year over that, and all findings have been remediated from that original internal audit. And lastly, we performed an internal audit over IT services follow-ups. We'll get into that here in just a little bit. In total, there are 2 open findings from that internal agency compliance audit that we performed this year. So next year, follow-up procedures would need to be performed over those 2 open findings, and that's all of the open findings for the agency at this time from internal audit activities. I'm going to discuss now the annual report. This is required for all Texas state agencies as part of the Texas Government Code 2102.015. They're required to be submitted and publicly posted by November the 1st. And they also are sent to the LBB, the Governor's Office, and the State Auditor's Office. The format of these reports is prescribed by the SAO, so it's a standard format that's consistent across all state agencies, regardless of who your internal auditor is. The details of that report include compliance with the government code, the internal audit plan for 2025, so whatever activities we perform for the current year. There's also an external quality review assessment that's required for all of us as internal auditors to go through. Weaver has received the highest rating on that. It also includes a forward look, so what activities do we plan on looking at next year, along with the associated budgeted hours for those, any external audit services that were performed, and then the mechanisms used for reporting fraud, waste, and abuse. You'll notice that this report is issued in draft format, and that's because the State Auditor's Office typically updates any guidance around this time of year. And just due to timing, we like to go ahead and present it in draft form, assuming that no changes are going to occur. They're typically the same. So in the 6 years I've been with Weaver, it hasn't changed much. So as a precautionary measure, we issue it in a draft, and then if there's no changes, we'll remove draft and it's final. So that is submitted today. And that's basically it. We met at the last board meeting and covered the majority of our internal audit activities. So this meeting today is really the IT and then that annual report that I just discussed. Definitely open for any questions that you all have.
Any questions regarding this part of the report? All right. So at this time, we'll go into executive session. A closed meeting will now be held for the purpose of conducting deliberations regarding security devices or security audits under the authority of the Texas Government Code sections 551.076 and .089. It's back on. Please note there were no final actions, decisions, or votes made in closed session. It is now August the 5th at 10:46, and we are concluding the executive session, and we will go back to our regular agenda. All right, at this time, we will go to E.4, and Danny, if you'll take us through a review of our goals and objectives.
Yes, ma'am. E.4, 26 days left in FY25, so it's time, I guess for the 12th time, Bradley, to review and approve FY26 goals and objectives. You guys were given a copy behind E.4. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Danny on the goals and objectives? All right, Danny, if you want to take us through the
Real
strategic.
quick, did you vote to approve the internal audit report?
I'm sorry, we do need a vote on that.
And then we'll also need to vote to approve the goals and objectives.
I'm sorry?
The goals and objectives will need it as well.
Okay. All right, so let's go back to the audit. If I can have a motion to approve the audit. Ian has made that motion. Donna has seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right. Then, as far as our goals and objectives, do we have a motion to approve what Danny has presented? Ian has made a motion. Donnie has made a second. All those in favor? And then we'll do that again with the strategic plan after Danny goes through.
E.5 is a review of FY27 through 29 strategic plan, the timeline. So
this is all of the ACPE programs that meet the expectation of the 25 standards. And we must take a motion to approve these universities and colleges of pharmacy. We have a motion from Bradley. Do we have a second? Second from Donnie. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. With that, we will go to Mr. Merriman to take us through PMP.
Good morning, Madam President and members of the board. During the previous quarter, there were no significant feature updates or enhancements to the prescription monitoring program. Next, I would like to highlight some of the statistics compiled from PMP data reported during the third quarter of fiscal year 2025. These can be viewed on the summary sheet, which can be found on tab E.7. There were a total of 3,457 new registered healthcare users that were granted PMP accounts during this period. By quarter's end, there were a total of 206,162 registered healthcare PMP users, which represents 75.3% of the total number of Texas licensed healthcare professionals that are eligible to have a PMP account. The percentage of eligible pharmacists that are registered with a PMP account decreased 4.5% to a total of 92.9%. The percentage of eligible physicians that are registered with a PMP account increased 1.5% to 90.4%. There were a total of 80.8 million searches during this quarter, PMP searches. Of that number, 44.8% of all searches were conducted by pharmacists, while physicians conducted 41.5% of the total. Additionally, out of the 80.8 million searches conducted, 66.3 million, which represents 82.1%, were integrated electronic health record searches rather than manual PMP searches. And finally, at the bottom, the graphic at the bottom right of the stat sheet illustrates that the Texas PMP has data sharing agreements with 39 other states or entities, and this number has remained unchanged from the previous quarter.
Are there any questions for David?
I have a question. I probably should have asked it yesterday. Why do you think the pharmacist number decreased? Is it because of more licensees or duplicate accounts? Or
Duplicate. We've noticed I guess a year or so ago, that many pharmacists have more than one account, and that shouldn't have happened. But I think a lot of those accounts were imported from when we took over the PMP, and they were just imported into the system. So many of those accounts weren't being used, and there are systems in place to prevent duplicate accounts. But if occasionally it can happen such that the same user has a separate account, and so we've been auditing and it's been an ongoing project for more than a year to get rid of those duplicate accounts.
Thank you.
Any other questions for David? David, thank you for your report. And with that, we'll go to E.8. And Megan will give us an update on SOA hearings.
Okay, so this is your report on appeals. The only one that we have at this time is the Amayosi matter, and in this one we covered it last time as well. The petitioner, a pharmacist, has an agreed board order that was entered back in February of 2017, and we recently received an order of non-disclosure relating to the underlying conduct. The petitioner filed a motion for enforcement of the order of non-disclosure by contempt with the 179th District Court in Harris County. An attorney from the Attorney General's office has been appointed to handle the case. A hearing was held back on March 20th. However, the judge found the petitioner had not properly filed his petition and exhibit, so the hearing did not move forward. Subsequently, the petitioner renewed the motion for enforcement, and the Office of the Attorney General filed a response to the new motion. And then the petitioner has now filed a motion for sanctions, and the Office of the Attorney General filed a response yesterday. And those are all of our court matters.
Thank you. Sean, do you want to take us through an update on the legislative session, please?
Yes. Okay, hopefully this is loud enough. Hello. Attached in E9 is a chart of legislation that affects the agency and or the practice of pharmacy. Beginning with HB 1700, the bill establishes that each regulatory authority must create rules that standardize how health professionals document and retain patient consent related to various key aspects, namely treatment, data collection, and data sharing. Rules will be proposed in a future board meeting. Moving to HB 4535, the bill mandates that healthcare providers to obtain written informed consent before administering a COVID-19 vaccine, including providing individuals with a standardized information sheet detailing the benefits, risks, and other relevant aspects of the vaccine. Next is HB 5196. The bill establishes guidelines for teleworking arrangements for state employees, allowing state agency heads to authorize telework. It requires written agreements outlining telework terms, mandates agency telework plans with performance and security standards, and prohibits telework as a condition of employment. Moving to HB 5629. The bill facilitates occupational licensing for military service members, veterans, and spouses by requiring Texas state agencies to accept and expedite licenses from other states that are similar in scope and in good standing. Related rules were proposed earlier in the board meeting. Next, SB 493 establishes that pharmacy benefit managers cannot prohibit or restrict pharmacists from informing enrollees about the difference in out-of-pocket costs for prescription drugs under their benefit plan versus the costs without a claim. Next, SB 912 introduces a continuing education tracking system for healthcare practitioners in Texas, requiring licensing entities to verify continuing education compliance for license renewals. Rules will be proposed in a future board meeting. Moving to SB 1080, the bill amends the Occupations Code to allow for the issuance of provisional occupational licenses to certain individuals with criminal convictions, emphasizing educational program completion as a condition. It permits the revocation of licenses for license holders in prison following a felony conviction, detailing specific criminal offenses that warrant such actions. Related rules were proposed earlier in the board meeting. Next, SB 1236 seeks to regulate the relationship between pharmacists or pharmacies and or pharmacy benefit managers by stipulating conditions under which payments can be adjusted, requiring disclosures and online access to pharmacy benefit network contracts and prohibiting certain mandatory participation and fee requirements. Moving to SB 1818, the bill mandates that Texas state agencies provide provisional licenses to military service members, veterans, and military spouses upon application, allowing them to temporarily engage in business or occupation while their full license is processed. Provisional licenses will expire either upon a final decision on the application or 180 days after issuance. Related rules were proposed earlier in the board meeting. Finally, SB 2587 amends various sections of the government code to modify the requirements and procedures for accessing and using criminal history information for various state agencies and professionals in Texas. That brings me to the end of the chart, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sean. Any questions for Sean? All right. All right, so our next thing is E.10. You'll notice that through this legislative session, we were able to move our executive director to Group 5. It allows us to raise the salary to the amount of the General Appropriations Act. And I would like to have a motion to make this possible. We have a motion from Randy and a second from Bradley. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, with that, Miss Caroline, we're going to go to you on the agenda for F1.
Okay. So F.1 is your report on the closed complaints. So these are complaints that were closed. You're looking at the third quarter. And it has a comparison and a cumulative total for the full fiscal year for the previous 2 quarters. And the bottom chart is just a breakout of comparison of those closed without disciplinary action to those closed with disciplinary orders. Page 2 is a quarterly average of last year's fiscal numbers to the comparison for the third quarter of this fiscal year. And then the same thing of the those closed without disciplinary action to those closed with disciplinary action. And if there's no questions on that, we'll can move over to F.2, which is the open complaints. So again, the top chart is historical information, and the bottom chart is the quarterly report on the open complaints. And if you're looking at the last column from July, when we ran the numbers on July 17th, these are the complaints by their agent categories.
All right. It's good to see 24's days went down. I know that's the hard work of your group. Any questions for Caroline? All right. Well, thank you, Caroline. So G is scheduled in, but we can go ahead and go down to G.2. Megan, if you want to take us through.
Yes. So G.2, you all have received the information associated with these items in your folder and in the link. And the information has also been put on your laptops. These are all of the agreed board orders, default orders, and remedial plans that have either been entered or are being proposed to you. So G.2 is a report of all of the orders that have been entered by Danny as the executive director. These are the ones that you have authorized him to enter. This item does not need a vote. It's just for your information. So if you don't have any questions on these, we'll move on to the next part. G.3 and G.4. So G.3, these are the proposed agreed board orders and default orders. And G.4 are the proposed remedial plans. These include both orders and remedial plans resulting from informal conferences and those proposed by mail per your previous instructions. You'll notice the orders resulting from an informal conference. For those, the chart indicates the board members that were at that informal conference. If you participated in the informal conference, we would automatically recuse you from that vote. So unless you have any questions about these, we would need a motion to approve the proposed agreed board orders and default orders and proposed remedial plans. So those are items G.3 and G.4.
Are there any questions? You're making a motion to approve. So we have a motion to approve from Ian. Do we have a second? Second from Donnie. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. We will go ahead then and go to H. We want to thank Jenny and Bradley for their service in the last year as Vice President and Treasurer. At this time, I will take motions for the Vice President first. You have a second? All right, we have a motion for Donna as Vice President. All those in a second, all those in favor, aye. Any opposed? Motion carries, and thank you in advance for your service. Now I will take nominations for Treasurer. All right. We have a motion by Donna and a second by Ian for Donnie to take the position of treasurer. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right. Motion carries. All right. That takes care of our agenda other than our scheduled items and just the miscellaneous. This will be a little bit of a longer lunch, so for those of you coming back, I apologize for that. But we will adjourn now at 11:05. We will come back at 1 o'clock, and we will have this meeting rest at this point.